Oh, sorry about that, people. I've had to go live again. I'm gonna have to share that again. Un momento. Alright, I had to... Let me just share that again. Is this the... Right, I've had to... I don't know what it was. It just froze and I couldn't really see any more comments. So I thought, rather than risking it, let's just... I'll just put that on there, part 2. Post. I'm just sharing it again so people know. Right, okay, so let's take some of the questions, people. What's going on? Locked in from New Zealand. Ahlan wa sahlan, people. Ahlan wa sahlan. Right, so what else has been going on this week? Some interesting things I wanted to... I had a Madrasah reunion with some of the guys from where I studied in Karachi, Pakistan. It'd been quite a while. Some of them I hadn't met for maybe, I don't know, like 17 years, something like that. So they came down. We had a meetup in London. That was pretty fun, actually. It was good to meet some guys. We had Sheikh Farhan Naeem, who's the son of Mufti Naeem from Jamia bin Noria, and he was speaking of the great projects they've got going in Jamia bin Noria. So I was really impressed, actually, because they're upgrading the whole madrasa to a university status, and they kind of modernizing the elements that are needed. They're trying to bring in more diversity. They're trying to bring in more breadth to the curriculum. They're introducing certain subjects. So they did ask. So we had a dialogue, and he was asking for some ideas. I did say that I think it's imperative that one, that they introduce critical thought studies. Okay, so critical studies, that how should we approach things, how to be critical, and classes on that. So although they're, I think, a bit away from that, because you got to remember the whole beginning is from a madrasa mentality, but still that's... And I said I think it's important that they should teach Urdu adab, like poetry and poets and the lives of poets and things like this. What do you think, people? The lives of... So he said, yes, of course, people like Allama Iqbal. I said, Allama Iqbal is great. You know, Allama Iqbal is a legend. He's great. But Allama Iqbal is a like a revolutionary, very strong character like that. You know, he's good. The ulama like him anyway. But I said, what about the others? What about Ghalib? What about the Don? Mir Taqi Mir. Or in his words, Afsos tumko Mir se sohbat nahi rahi. That's the legend, people, Mir Taqi Mir. So he has a poem, which that is a part of that. Kahan paida hote hain aise paranganda taba log. So that word means like some, you know, these kind of strange wonders, these people that are just so, that are unique, that where are such people born? And he says, Afsos tumko mir se sohbat nahi rahi. That it's a shame that you no longer have the company of people like Mir. Allah, what a legend, people. What a legend. That's what I will say. So, what else are we looking at? I want to take a look at a hadith a little later on. This hadith of somebody that came to the Prophet and said, I want to commit zina, will you allow for me? And the Prophet said, will you allow it? Would you be happy with your mother doing that? So I want to speak on that hadith. Is it a legitimate hadith, and the discussion around that? We'll go into that though, but first of all, let's take some of your questions. ما رأيك عن جبران عن Gibran Khalil Gibran وشعره? I think Gibran Khalil Gibran. Mufti's internet connection is shakier than Shamaima's pension plans. Yeah, the shocking thing is, my internet connection in Birmingham, in the Midlands, in the heart of England, right, is shaking, right, despite it being on the most reliable. And yet these people in Raqqa, in some caves, can make the latest digitalized videos, and they've got the best internet access. I'm starting to see why Shemaima went there after all. She goes, well, on the bright side, at least there'll be no buffering. As soon as you say no buffering, there's all these guys going, wait a minute, no buffering? Quick, guys, let's go. So that's how they got them. I've said Mutiur Rahman is asking on Gibran Khalil Gibran. I think Gibran Khalil Gibran is an amazing poet. Obviously, I mean, poetry, in this last era, you're not going to get so many amazing people. You will have Gibran Khalil Gibran, you will have other people like Ahmed Shawqi. Ahmed Shawqi is pretty good as well. There was a line of his that I remember. I once made a stamp, in my early days. Allah, back in the days when I was in Damascus studying, so the late 90s people. So before I was leaving to go to Pakistan, so I had this stamp made out of a poem. The things we do, huh? So it was a poem of Ahmed Shawqi's, I believe, where he said, what is it? وَمَا نَيْلُ الْمَطَالِبِ بِالتَّمَنِّي وَلَكِنْ تُؤْخَذُ الدُّنْيَا غِلَابًا. Allah. Where he said that you don't, وَمَا نَيْلُ الْمَطَالِبِ like you don't achieve your goals by just desiring them. Rather, you have to seize the world. Allah. I thought that was an amazing line. I actually I made it out as a stamp that I'd put on my books. وَمَا نَيْلُ الْمَطَالِبِ بِالتَّمَنِّي وَلَكِنْ تُؤْخَذُ الدُّنْيَا غِلَابًا. Allah. I'm trying to ask that. What are your main issues with Salafiyah? Replying to Chris. Good question. What's Chris's good question? What is your problem? Sabah Dawood Qureshi says, what is your problem with Wahhabis? Do I have a problem with Wahhabis? I don't. Do you have a favorite child? I think other people think I have a favorite child. I don't think. To me, they're both adorable. I've 2 daughters that I own up to. But so Layla, who's 7, and Zara, who's 4. So I think, to me, they are both adorable in their own ways. But people feel sometimes I may favor Layla. I don't know why they think that. I suppose they think that because of the bond I've had with her, because she was born first and things like this. And because she's older, I suppose, as in she's only 7, but still, she's older. So sometimes she'll talk in such a sensible way, and I'll talk. But I don't really, to me, I don't feel that I'm showing any kind of favoritism. But sometimes I've had people say that to me. Oh, the way you'll tell off the other one, why don't you tell, you never tell Layla off like that. But that's not true. It's just the other one does so much mischief. She wrecks everything. So, so unfortunately, taken after my personality, the other one has. So, right. Let's see some of these questions. Somebody's asked, Salam Mufti, I heard you said one time that Al-Qarafi was some kind of an expert sculptor. Is this true? That is true. Imam Qarafi was unique in making these kind of small figurines and statues and stuff like this, and he used to have them. And I read out a quote where he's speaking about certain he's praising them and saying, wow, I went to this place and this guy had made this, and some that he had made, and how expert they were and what they could do and everything. So he was very much into that. But that's a side of our scholars that unfortunately people don't show. Somebody's asked, do you watch The Punisher? I watched a bit of The Punisher, season 1, but then, after a while, it just, when you're into it, you're into it, but then you kind of like, it's not really, all, I kind of like lost interest afterwards. Respected Mufti Sahib, how do you like to be addressed? Huh? How do you like to be undressed? Huh? You naughty. I usually from here top down. Huh? Acha. Addressed. I thought you meant undressed. Acha. Good thing I caught that. Otherwise, I would have. Do you watch Game of Thrones? Are there any new episodes, or what's your opinion on attending musical concerts? Do you consider them different to going to cinema? I mean, there's nothing wrong with going to cinema. What's wrong with going to cinema? I mean, why would going to cinema be haram? Unless it's that kind of a cinema. Unless you're going to do the naughty, which is something else, of course. That's a separate issue. You could be doing that anyway. But this, going to a cinema is to watch a movie. Mufti, don't you play any video games? This is a lot of interesting personal questions. I have an arcade machine which has retro games like from the 80s and 90s. So it has like very old games like Pac-Man and all those really old games. And it's got right up to like Street Fighter and all the different editions, Turbo Edition and whatnot. And games like Rambo and all that kind. But they're nothing like the computer games that kids play today. I honestly, I suppose I would have probably played computer games if I knew how to. I don't know how to play the contemporary games, and I just don't have the interest to learn because they seem so complicated. It's like you got to learn it's like seasons. It's not just like I mean, if I did want to play, let's say those kind of arcade, I bought that more. I've got the arcade machine here actually in my Mufti cave. I bought it more just out of, chalo, chaska hai boss, chaska. It's fun, and sometimes I've played like the old spaceship games and stuff like this, and but these are just like a quick game and you're done. But these kind of games that kids play today, I don't even know how they. I mean, you got to memorize everything, and you got to live the game, and it goes on, and wow, I mean. I don't know. I haven't got I'm not that interested to learn. I suppose if I was so keen, I would learn, but I'm not that interested. But it's not simple enough to do it either. It's like, let me tell you an allegory of this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ gives a story where he's speaking of an allegory, and he says that it is like kalahmi tayrin. What is it? What's the word in the hadith? But it's like the meat of a bird, but the bird is frail. Ala ra'si jabalin wa'ar. At the top of a very kind of difficult terrain mountain. On the top of that. La sahlun fayurtaqa, wa la saminun fayuntaqal. That's in the words of a hadith, that the meat, like the mountain isn't easy that you climb up there, and even if you did, the meat wasn't so much that you'd take it away. So it's like, it's for those, I suppose, who are into it. Who's your personal favorite poet? I love so many poets, honestly, especially the Urdu. I mean, I love poetry and all. Even in Arabic, I love poems by Mutanabbi. I love poems. Mutanabbi is a legend, really, in poetry. You couldn't, and he has a diverse range. A lot of them he does praise Saif ad-Dawlani. Can get a bit, banal. It gets a bit boring sometimes when he's just praising Sayfud-Dawla, the king of his time. But there's other, he'll speak about other things. He'll speak about honor. He'll speak about knowledge. He'll speak about romance. What's his? He has this killer line that وَمَا كُنْتُ مِمَّنْ يَدْخُلُ الْعِشْقَ قَلْبَهُ, that I was not from those people who love would easily enter their heart. I wasn't from that category of people. لَكِنْ مَنْ يُبْصِرْ جُفُونَكِ يَعْشَقِ. Allah. He said, but anybody who sees your eyes they're helpless except to love. Ya Mutanabbi. Mutanabbi was in his time, but Mutanabbi in Arabic, there's loads of poets. Abu Nawas, the legend. There's but in Urdu, I love the Urdu poets, starting with Mir, and whether it's going to be so many of them, Dagh, Zawq, Ghalib, obviously, the Don, the legend. You can't go without Ghalib. Obviously, Allama Iqbal's cool, but Allama Iqbal's like a nice, good, he's a good person. He's like he's not that corrupt. He's not corrupt, right? The others, corrupt ain't the right word, but like sometimes, you see, when you're listening to poetry, you don't want it to be always about revolution and all this kind of stuff. That's good as well. Sometimes you want the niceties in life. You want a bit of the naughty in the poetry. So it's good. So the other poets are like that. They're a lot more here. Recently, you'll get Ahmed Faraz, his poetry, Sagar Siddiqui, Sagar Siddiqui, people. John Elia, loads, man. There's just so many in Urdu. There's one of Ahmed Faraz that I was just reading again the other day, where he says, what is it? Aankh se dur na ho, dil se utar jayega. That don't go out of sight, out of mind. Don't go too far out of sight, lest you fall or you disappear from my heart. That aankh se dur na ho, dil se utar jayega. Waqt ka kya hai, guzarta hai, guzar jayega. That he said that, don't worry about time. It's made to pass. Like time will just pass. Waqt ka kya hai, guzarta hai, guzar jayega. Dukh qayamat ka hai faraz. That he says, his final line in it is, zabt lazim. Zabt is to control. Control. Zabt lazim hai, magar dukh qayamat ka hai faraz. That he says that we must control ourselves, but the pain is uncontrollable. Zalim ab ke bina roega to mar jayega. That's that. He says to himself that if now you don't let out with tears and crying, this will be the death of you. That you have to at some point let it go. Let it. The Urdu poetry, I totally love it. Right, so what else is going on, people? And I have to say, I feel it's such a shame that Islamic scholarship in the Indo-Pak world has left Urdu adab. Either because they feel that these poets were mainly from India and we're not going to be a part of, what are they to do with us because we're in Pakistan? And if that be the case, then I think that's deeply disappointing. Or the other reason, that they think that these people weren't that religious, so they've left them. And even if that's, then I think it's still very embarrassing that you left this amazing reservoir of literature because of being judgmental. So I think really Urdu poetry is something that people should really look into, especially in that part of the world. So that's my thoughts. So what else is going on? All right. Liz. People, Liz is in that. You know, earlier on, I haven't fully announced the story yet, but I'll announce it in time. But Liz, when I mentioned earlier on about the DNA thing, and I said that I'd gone on and got some feedback, so I'd been reconnected with an aunt, people, and that is Liz, who is in the house today. Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome, Liz, and I'll speak more about that later on. But I thought, since I just saw Liz in the house, amazing what this what DNA does nowadays. So and Liz is from Ireland, by the way, so she's all Irish, or not all, but obviously links up with my gramps along the way. But I'll speak more about that later on in another forthcoming, inshallah, episode. But I thought that's amazing how today people can reconnect through things like science. It's just amazing. So yep. So welcome, Liz. Ahlan wa sahlan. Can you explain Rabbi Zidni Ilmen? So Rabbi Zidni Ilmen is a dua, it's a prayer in the Quran, and it simply means that increase me in knowledge, that Lord increase me in knowledge. Is Ibn Sa'ad reliable? See, the thing with the Seerah of the Prophet is that really none of those classical Seerahs do justice in the way we would want it today, because you have to understand that they had a total, like their methodology of what they were trying to do is very different to what you're trying to do today. So today you would like to read, let's say, the Seerah, which means the biography of the Prophet. Now you want to read this as a narrative, as a story. You want to read like, okay, he was a prophet, he was born and raised, and this is who he was, and this is his name, and here's an incident from his childhood, and here he grew up, and here he did that. Now those seerahs that were documented back, like really far back, just first 100 years after the Prophet, 150 years, 200 years after the Prophet, those people didn't have that viewpoint in mind. They were simply documenting just narrations, whatever they could get hold of. They weren't even too fussed whether the narrations were authentic. This causes a problem on a cataclysmic scale, really, because they throw in all kinds which raise more questions than answer them, and then neither is it a narrative that flows. So it's not a story that you're going to read. You're just going to read like the event, an event. It's just documents. It's like going through archives. It's not actually like a story. So you're better off reading today things that have been written by maybe contemporary people, for contemporary people that have leaned in on prior sources. I think that's what I would recommend more. I know Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has something on the Seerah of the Prophet. I think maybe go through something like that. I haven't actually been through his whole thing. I think, yeah, Lings has... it's just called Muhammad, I think. That's all it's called. Ling's biography of the Prophet. I think that's good. But I would definitely advise contemporary sources as opposed to going something so archaic. It wouldn't really make too much sense. Do you consider pork gelatin to have gone through istihala in food? Right, okay, Tam. Somebody's mentioned here that the best seerah available in English today is a compendium of sources on the prophetic narrative by Samira Al-Zayed. I'm not sure. I haven't read that, but sure, by all means, you can check it out, people. Pork gelatin, do I consider it to have gone through istihala in food, making it permissible to eat? I do think pork gelatin, I think all gelatin I've got a detailed clip on YouTube where I'm answering about gelatin. I do believe that all gelatin is it is halal. It's not haram. It's not forbidden. And the reason, there's a number of things that go into that. One is that, including pork, it mainly rests on the concept, what is called in Arabic istihala, which means that such a chemical decomposition, a breakdown of the structures, that it changes, that it's a different entity. So it's like how alcohol becomes vinegar. It has a very similar molecular structure, but with subtle changes to the molecular body, it becomes a different entity. So in a similar way, things like gelatin, although there is beef gelatin, there's plant sources as well, but there is pork gelatin as well. But the kind of breakdown is that immense that I no longer, this isn't just me, this is many ulama that have said things like this, and I go through the whole breakdown. I mention people from the past that speak about this, how from the Hanafi madhab, Abu Yusuf, how Ibn Abd al-Hakam, and I speak of from the Malikiya, I believe Majishun from the Malikiya, and other people that spoke of these. And there's a greater argument to it as well. Things like a lot of the certain extracts from bones weren't considered haram anyway, and there's a whole detailed debate that I go through. Not a debate, a discussion and a discourse that is on YouTube. You can check that out. But to keep it brief, yes, I feel that it's not haram. I'm not saying you need to take it. I'm not saying you have to or you should. If you don't feel comfortable with gelatin, then by all means you can avoid it. But if you wanted to take it, you can. It's not haram. Right. Alright. Imi King Khalik, mashallah. Alright. Shukran. Those of you tuning in, remember to click like, share. What's that? And it says sleeps 102 12. I've heard it means, alright, okay. I can't understand that question. So we can eat starbursts with no guilt. No guilt, people. Islam never really ought to have any guilt anyway. This guilt thing isn't really part of the Islamic tradition, although it does exist today. But it's not. See, let me give you an example. People, if you travel, let's say, the Muslim world, you will find in many places Islam as it stands today. So let's say you travel, there's probably about 50 Muslim countries in the world today. If you go through them, you would see many things like done up graves, for example. Many people going to the graves, a lot of grave related rituals. You will see people going to these darbars. They will seek repentance or seek assistance. They will go there and make offerings. This is very common. I mean, you wouldn't dispute that it's very common. Yet in authentic Islam, none of these things actually exist. In fact, it's actually frowns upon these ideas of asking the dead to do things for you and stuff like this, and only God is all capable and all powerful and all giving. But yet, if you travel the Muslim world, you would think, well, this is so common, it can't be that all these people have got it wrong. So it's not about, what I'm trying to do is show you that, you see, this, people make an easy assumption sometimes. They think, well, how can it be that, you're saying this, and how can it be that all these people are like that? So how can they be wrong? It's not about them being wrong, but it's about the authentic traditions were not like that. That's all I'm saying. But yes, this is prevalent today. And the example of the grave culture, that kind of, going to the dead, asking the dead for help, making offerings to graves, or doing up these kind of graves of the saints, and all of this stuff is almost commonplace in almost every single Muslim country by the majority. So if one traveled, they would think this is definitely authentic Islam, but it isn't. So in the same way, when I say certain things and it comes as a shock, it's because I'm kind of just speaking about the original sources and what the authentic message actually was. So Islam didn't, in essence, have this kind of guilt culture. It didn't have this thing of, oh, we should be guilty and we should feel guilty about sins and stuff like this. Although today, that is, you're right, that is the kind of, if you go around the world, that's how people will behave in that way. And I think some of that was picked up by the Judeo-Christian, from the Judeo-Christian tradition, and kind of transported into Islam as well. Do you believe the graves being desecrated in Jannatul baqi was correct? Mention the Prophet himself visiting the graves. Yes, I'm not saying that there were no graves in the time of the Prophet. I think somebody misunderstood my point. What I'm trying to say is there's a very folklore. There's folklore Islam. There's like a folkloric Islam that is common everywhere, right throughout the Muslim world. And I'm just trying to show you that the truth isn't necessarily democratic. It isn't something that, oh, how can all these people be on this, therefore it must be the authentic reading of something. It's not. I'm not trying to pick on that culture and trying to condemn it. What I'm trying to do is give an analogy in saying, like, when I say these things and people sometimes say, well, you're saying it, but how come all these other people are not saying it? Right now, do I agree with the graves that were desecrated in Jannatul baqi? I don't agree with that, no. So what it was during the Ottoman era, the graves outside of Medina, which is now inside Medina city, they were all kind of done up, a lot of them like mausoleums and stuff like this. And so with the whole rise of the Wahhabi kind of movement, they did break down all the graves. I'm against the desecrating them, although I'm not for doing up this whole kind of grave. See, the problem with the grave culture is that it's a culture of superstition. And I'm against superstitions. I don't agree with, I think the voice of reason cannot accept there to be superstitions. So, and I think Islam inherently is profoundly against superstition in its authentic teaching. I mean, today, obviously, it's in its folkloric perception, it's superstitious. If you look at Islam today, it appears to be a superstitious religion, but it's not. It's actually very anti-superstition. But so that's why I'm against making up and doing these kind of grey, this whole almost like a worship area around saintly graves and things like this. But if they were already made, how do you deal with it? So I wouldn't agree with let's just go and break everything and demolish things, because it's going to cause a lot of hurt to a lot of people, and that has to be taken into consideration. So I wouldn't agree with desecrating them and things like this. Superstition is a culture-centric problem. I totally agree. Ustad Wasim Hussain is in the house. Ahlan wa sahlan. Wasim Hussain, ahlan wa sahlan. So what's the point of Taubah if there is no guilt? Taubah is repentance. You see, there's two things here, people. You see, there is a sense of remorse in Islam. That does exist. I'm not saying that there's no remorse, no regret in Islam. The concept of regret does exist. So when the story of Abel and Cain is related in the Quran, and the brother kills the other brother, it does mention فَأَصْبَحَ مِنَ النَّادِمِينَ, and then he became regretful over what he did. Allah is showing that story as an action, as a kind of story to demonstrate regret. Regret does exist. It's a human condition. I'm speaking about this burden of guilt, this kind of psychological, like, I have sinned and I'm a guilty person, and carrying that kind of guilt, and this is not authentically Islamic, although today it is commonplace amongst Muslims. This, we are guilty people and we're sinful, and being this kind of like, I think it just depresses people. That was my point, not on the concept of remorse and regret. So if you've done something wrong and trying to make amends, that's what Taubah was about. And hence the word Taubah in Arabic meant to return. Taba yatubu, to come back. So it meant that if you'd done something wrong, you came back and made amends for what you'd done. Right, why shrine people, what? what's the why shrine people on high on weed and charas? I don't understand what the question is there. Mufti, what is the meaning of the knots in Surah al Falaq? Is it not to do with black magic? No, people, I've said this time and time again, and I've got a detailed video on this, that look, there is no such thing as magic, okay? There's no such thing as demonic possessions. These things are all superstition and part of a culture of superstition. But let me explain what... I'll give a few words. I've got a very detailed video. You can watch it. It's on YouTube. And I've got one whole course that I do side by side with Sheikh Akram Nadwi from Oxford on that. And it's on YouTube. But just to kind of... just to kind of give you some brief description. You see, magic... Okay, when we say magic exists, like the Quran speaks of some magic, or the people in the past spoke of magic. Now, magic, yes, right, but what did they mean? So, Fakhruddin al-Razi, Ibn Ashur, these great Mufassirin, these people who've done commentaries on the Quran, they highlight that, look, there's three kinds of magic that they accepted. Now, using the word magic today for them doesn't really make too much sense. But once you read their definitions, you think, oh, well, oh, right, yeah, well, that makes sense. So they say one category is like mind control. So it's like what today they will call hypnosis, right? So this is something that they would have called magic in the past. Like you prime somebody, you use tactics, techniques to kind of control them. Now, this, yes, of course, this exists, and that did exist. And that's fine. So that we don't have a problem. If you want to call that magic, fine. Today they have other words for it. But if that's what you mean by magic, then that, yes, that does exist. You can prime people. Advertising companies do it all the time. You can use psychological techniques to gain advantage over people. You can do all of these things. And that's true. The second, Ibn Ashur writes in his great tafsir, At-Tahrir wa Tanweer, is using potions. Now, by potions, it is the equivalent of chemicals today. So there are certain things, like so for example, that are naturally found. Today, you could buy drugs. So let's say today, for example, somebody administered LSD, or they administered DMT. They gave you, you would have, in fact, they call DMT the spirit molecule. You would have a whole spiritual kind of like an awakening. Now, whether it was things as powerful as this, you know, tryptamines and things like this, or other things in the past, like if you had, let's say, lithium, which is naturally found. Now, lithium is a mood stabilizer. Now, imagine somebody, like in the past, let's say somebody had mood issues, and you went to some magician and he said, well, here, take this, and this contained natural elements of lithium. Now, that would stabilize their mood. And he said, this is a special water, and I've done this to it. Now, to you, that would be magic, but there is an explanation to it. So that is true. And things like aphrodisiacs were used. So obviously, in the past, people would say, oh, you know, sexual issues. Oh, my husband isn't interested in me, or this isn't. And they would administer these kind of potions, and the books are full of them. You know, you've got these books that, like, if you read the scholarly books, they speak about, oh, their version of Viagra. They go on about these kind of things, and they wrote books dedicated to them, believe it or not. I mean, it was a big deal back then as well. So they had their natural version of them, and so to those people it was like magic. And the third kind is, which is like magic tricks today, like using card tricks or pulling a rabbit out of a hat or doing things like this. So it is magic, but it's deceiving the eyes. So it's like sleight of hand. And so that, you can call that magic, but it's not really happening when a person pulls a rabbit out of a hat. There's a trick to it. There's an art to it. So those people, when the great Indian rope trick, when they would climb up a rope in the air, there was a trick to it. So yes, these things were magic, but beyond that, magic didn't exist. It didn't exist as a true entity, right? So you have to understand that, and this is just, unfortunately, many Muslims believe in things like black magic, and it's stupid. It's like embarrassing. people will tell you, you know, the amount of people I've spoken to that will say to me, oh, that they've had, their relationship has broken down. And when you ask them, they will say, oh, it's because of magic. And you think, no, mate, it's not because of black magic, right? So, it's not, you know, oh, it's because of the evil eye. The evil eye. These things are all medieval folklore, people. They have no basis in Islam. They either it's just come through superstition or it's just based on weak hadith. And yes, some scholars in the past did accept them, and I accept that, but that's because they had no other explanation for certain things. So in the past, when somebody had something like multiple personality disorder, or what they call today dissociative identity disorder, or they had split personalities, to a person 700 years ago, he would probably think, okay, that's a demonic possession. But that's because he doesn't know how else to explain it. But today we have some explanations. What about the Prophet Zachariah alayhi salam's time, when there was magic? What there was no magic in his time either. Mufti Sahib, if one was to make Hijra today, what would be the best place to relocate to? Behave. Hijra. Hijra is the concept of you and the Islamic obligatory migration. There is no hijrah, okay. There's a hadith in Bukhari, La hijrata ba'd al-fath. The Prophet said that there is no hijrah after the conquest of Mecca in his time. In the Prophet's time, 1400 years ago. There is no mandatory migration, people. By all means, if you want to, if a person wants to travel, if they want to relocate, you have the freedom of movement, freedom. In Islam, you have no prohibition. If you want to get up and go to America, get up and go to Pakistan, get up and go to Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Morocco or Turkey, you can do that, but there's no Islamic requirement to do so. And it's ridiculous thinking that, you know, people had this belief that, oh, Muslims shouldn't live in non-Muslim lands. That is stupid. It has no basis in Islam. And Islam is for the whole world, like Muslims wherever they are in the world, people wherever they are in the world, Islam is for them as well. It's not just for Arabia. So in that case, everybody should have just stayed in Arabia. Why would the companions go out and try to take Islam to different parts of the world if it wasn't for the whole of the world? It was for anybody. So we shouldn't really have this understanding that, oh, people should migrate to Muslim territories. I mean, that's a very twisted way of thinking. I'll do your, what's this? You reckon Jesus had an out-of-body experience before crucifixion? Right, somebody asked me, what do we believe about the Jesus crucifixion? Now, okay, Jesus alayhi salam, in our understanding, according to Islam, right, everybody accepts that Muslims generally believe he didn't die on the cross. This is the Muslim understanding. Okay, so the Quran says, وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ. That they did not kill him and they had not crucified him, but it appeared to be so to them. And this is what the verse of the Quran says. Now, after that they disagree, Muslims do. Some Muslims feel Jesus was never ever put on the cross to start off with. That they got it wrong and they put somebody else on the cross. To me, that's a weak understanding, but many Muslims do believe that as well. So the point they agree on, all Muslims agree on, that he didn't die on the cross. And he wasn't. So that's the point that all Muslims are unanimous on. They disagree up to that point. So some say he was never put on the cross to begin with. Others feel that he was put on the cross, but he just didn't die on the cross. And that's the understanding that I would go with, that I would feel that Jesus Christ was put on the cross, but they didn't successfully crucify him. So when the verse says وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ, meaning they didn't crucify him as in successfully. Because to crucify somebody meant to execute them through crucifixion. But you see, the way crucifixion worked was Romans, that was actually a reserved punishment generally for either insurgents or their versions of terrorists in that day and age. It wasn't a punishment for anybody. And it's a mistranslation through biblical sources that the people on the cross with Jesus were thieves. Although they may have been thieves as well, but they were actually what we'd call today, like, you see, in the past, what they would translate sometimes as highway robbers, but the highway robbers were not just thieves. It was the fact that they would terrorize the whole towns. So even in the Quran, when it speaks of highway robbery as such a great crime, it doesn't speak of robbery as such a great... it speaks of it as a crime, but not in the same way. Because, you see, in that day and age, there were only certain paths that led out of a town. And you would terrorize an entire region by cutting off that route to them. So it was held in equivalent with today what we would call like sedition and insurgencies and things like this, and hence they were on the cross as well with Jesus. So Jesus, when he's put on the cross on the Friday, he has to be taken down before sunset or before Maghrib, because the Jews weren't allowed to be killing people on the Sabbath. So normally somebody would be left to hang on the cross for several days before he would die. And you wouldn't die as you think. You'd actually die because by the way you're actually hung up, it would actually lead to compression of the lungs, that you'd actually eventually suffocate and die. It's not actually what some people think you'd die on the cross because, maybe no water or things like this. No, it's actually because the way you're hanging and you're trying to hold up your weight, your lungs eventually just collapse on themselves and you die of asphyxiation and things like this. So Jesus had to be taken down the same day. So it makes sense that he wasn't actually dead when they took him off. And I know the Romans, the soldier pierced his lung to see if blood would come out and said, oh yeah, that's enough, take him down. So that's my understanding. Right. All right, people, what's this Rishta talk going on? Frobbery is saying, Abu Anaya, I need a Rishta too. Huh? Matchmaking going on. All right, people, all right. What's this? How come Jesus' messenger is victorious whilst humiliated on the cross? That's not victory, that's utter humiliation. Maghlubiyat. What the Quran says, Allah has decreed, verily it is I. Oh, right. Is that the لَأَغْلِبَنَّ أَنَا وَرُسُلِي? That indeed we will overcome. Right? You see, that's a good question. When Allah says in the Quran, لَأَغْلِبَنَّ أَنَا وَرُسُلِي, that we will overcome. What is it that will overcome about Jesus? Was it him as a person? He will overcome all the people. Well, that clearly didn't happen. But his message did. His message was successful. His mission that he came for, to a great extent, was it is, the leading religion in the world today. First and then followed by Islam. So today you'd probably have, 2 billion Christians in the world. So to say that he was unsuccessful is not true. He was successful. But you're right, he as a person wasn't ruling an empire. But who said that verse meant to rule as an empire? It didn't say that. It just said that it will overcome. And it did overcome in the end. That his message did overcome the falsehood against him. That he was a false messiah and so on. And he was embraced by people far and wide. You see, when you say... So he said, but Allah is not saying the message. He's saying the messengers. No, but listen. He's not saying the people. He's saying Rusuli. Rusul is Rasul, the person who carries a message. It's a descriptive, it's an adjective. It's not the person. So Allah never said Ana wa, He never said Ana wa Isa wa Musa wa, He never said me and Jesus and Moses and we will overcome. He said me and those who carry the message. Because the message did overcome eventually. So, I mean, because that's the actual reading of the verse of the Quran. How was his message successful? It was distorted within 10 years. Yeah, but I mean, it was successful as far as reaching far and wide. Now, obviously, we would disagree as Muslims with several elements of Christianity, but Christianity, you can't deny its success. It has been incredibly successful. Is religion metaphysics? Well, it depends on your definition of metaphysics. Metaphysics means that which is beyond the physical, so obviously religion is linked to metaphysics. Right, okay, so, right people, let's take a few, right, okay, there's this hadith. Let's go briefly into this hadith, and then we'll pick up on, there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, this hadith, I do not believe it to be a correct hadith, although part of the message may resonate with some reality, as in general teachings. So this popular hadith that a person came to the Prophet and said, I wish to fornicate. And the Prophet said, well, you know, would you be pleased for your mother to do that? Allegedly, the Prophet said this, and the person said no, and then he said, would you want your sister to do that? And the Prophet said no, and then the person said no, and then the Prophet allegedly said, would you want your daughter to do that? And the person said no, and so this kind of brings the person to accepting that no, you can't just go around fornicating. This is the hadith. This hadith is transmitted in the book of Musnad of Ahmad, and it's in Tabrani, the Mu'jam of Tabrani. It's also transmitted by Bayhaqi in his Shu'ab. Now it's related by the companion Abu Amama al-Bahili. Now, he has from him a particular chain, and I'll read this. It comes down mainly to two transmitters. A key person in this chain, it comes down to, is Yazid ibn Harun. Now, he is the main transmitter. So first of all, I'll explain why it's weak, and then I'll come back to the content of the hadith and show why that's problematic. Yazid ibn Harun is the main transmitter, so Imam Ahmad and all these people are getting it from Yazid ibn Harun. He's somebody who Yahya ibn Ma'in said he is not from the scholars of hadith. He is not an authority or a reliable person to transmit hadith. He's also the same person who Abu Haythama, great critic of hadith studies, I mean a great scholar who kind of he basically categorizes narrators of hadith as well. He said, and other people accept this is transmitted in all the other books as well, whether you want to check up the Seerah Alam al-Nubala or the other books on Rijal, that Yazid ibn Harun in his old age, he went blind. Okay, now when he went blind, he would be asked about hadith. Kana yus'alu anil hadith. And because he's blind, he can't read it. So what he used to do, he had a servant girl, right, who was some slave girl that was his servant that used to work with him. So he used to get her to read the hadith to the people. So so mashallah, so the hadith being transmitted were just through this girl who's transmitting these hadith, and no idea what her level of education would have been. I mean, she was just some servant girl. I mean, whether she was making mistakes whilst reading them are very likely. I mean, I doubt it she was like a master practitioner of hadith. So whatever she's saying, people would so she was like, mashallah, the great Madrasah al-Waqt, Muhaddithatul Waqt, right? So, and this just goes to show you can't accept. So this hadith by Yazid ibn Harun is unacceptable. And then there is And then it centrally relies on, he's transmitting it from this guy called Hariz ibn Uthman. Hariz ibn Uthman is another problematic narrator. Ibn Hibban clearly states that this guy is unreliable. We will not accept his hadith. And even any other narration that they have for this hadith all comes through Hariz ibn Uthman. And one of the things they say is he did have issues also with Sayyidina Ali, with Ali radiallahu an. But he had other issues as well, and Ibn Hibban obviously problematizes him. And he's also somebody, I'll share this story with you, that there's the famous hadith that the Prophet said to Ali radiallahu an, innaka minni bimanzilati Harun min Musa, that you are to me as Aaron was to Moses, except that there is no prophet after me. So this famous hadith, so he transmits it when he's asked, Hariz ibn Uthman. He says, no, that's correct, but you've got it wrong. It ought to read as innaka minni bimanzilati Qarun min Musa. Qarun, the great kafir, the guy that was really opposed to Prophet Moses in his time, and he had all the wealth, and he opposed the Prophet Moses, and he kind of boasted about all his wealth and everything. There's a mention of him in the Quran. So he says that the hadith ought to read to say to Ali radiallahu anh, that you are to me as Qarun was to Moses, not Harun. Right, so that's I thought I'd share that. But what's wrong with this hadith? I think this hadith, it has some teachings that are fine, that they resonate with the general Islamic teachings, as in, okay, it's trying to tell people, you should have sustained relationships, and you shouldn't kind of just be out there doing these kind of things. And that message does exist in Islam. Also, the fact that the Prophet is, that he's somebody that the people could have approached, and they could have asked him personal questions, and no matter how outrageous the questions were. So that message resonates with Islamic history and truth. However, the Prophet here emotionally blackmailing this person into kind of like, well, so would you like it for your mum? Or would you like it for this? Would you like it for this? The Prophet never, you get no parallel ever that the Prophet ever spoke like that. And like I mentioned before, that the Arabian society, sex was something very different for them. It's not even like, despite us being in a very liberal society today, sex even today is still a bit of a taboo. In the Arabian society, it was just seen as something just very natural. It did not have any taboo associated with it. So they didn't have these kind of cultures like, that the way that we would have today. Like people would say, oh my God, like, my daughter or my mother, and anything sexual associated with her is like something deeply embarrassing, or my sister, or especially in the Asian cultures, hence a lot of the swear words like sister this, sister that, they've evolved around taboos. So, but in the Arab culture, there was nothing like this. So if you read the hadith, they actually speak about a lot of sexual questions and stuff and discussion so openly that most people today, Islamic people, generally would be embarrassed actually translating them, because they would be like, And I gave the example last time of one of the particular marriages that they would do, called nikah shigar, which is then prohibited under Islamic teaching later on, where they would kind of marry, let's say, this person would marry his daughter and he would marry his daughter, like kind of like swap. Not swap as in, but they would exchange the relationship, as in your daughter for his daughter, like that, as a swap, or your sister for his sister, or even mother. They would do that. And this is pre-Islam, that society in which Islam kind of emerged, and this was called nikah shigar. And I mentioned in the past that what's actually quite shocking was that the term shigar, which a lot of people, why it's called shigar, they write it in the books, that part of the deal was that they had to seal the deal as in once they exchange the vows, as in you marry this person's daughter, he marries your daughter, or you marry his sister, he marries your sister, or your mother and his mother. Now, once the deal, to seal the deal, shigar was actually named after a sexual position. That they had to both go home and they had to consummate in that sexual position. This was the some naughty this one not nice. Yeah, this one. So they named it after the dog, as the dog has to take a leak, it has to lift one of its legs, and that term in Arabic was called shaghar al-kalb, that it lifted his leg. So the person had to consummate the with the shigar position, you know, this one not nice, you know. So this is why they called it shigar. So it's like, I'm sorry, this is the deal, you know, we have to seal the deal. I take this stuff really seriously, you know, this is like religious stuff, I have to take it very, I have to. So you see, so they weren't embarrassed about speaking about these kind of things. And they didn't have that. So it doesn't really tie up anyway, and then it doesn't tie up with the Prophet's character to emotionally or guilt trip people. So that's why I was showing, and the chain is weak anyway, based on Yazid ibn Harun and Hariz ibn Uthman. Some people read it as Hurayz, but it is Hariz ibn Uthman. So I thought I'll share that with you people. Right, I tell you what, whoa, is that the time? Let's take a few rapid round questions and we'll start wrapping this up. Somebody said wheelbarrow position. No, this was actually a different position, because it had to have, the leg had to be at a particular right angle, like a 100-degree angle. This was some, this one too much, you know, this one too much. Can you imagine scholars like Islamic, the people teaching this stuff? Naam, yes, brothers and sisters. And then the husband must go home and he must perform the shigar. I will now demonstrate. Qari Sahib demonstrating. The Qari Sahib is demonstrating on the pole. You know, the kids in the Madrasah. This is the state of. Alright, people. Alright, God. Oh, right, this reminds me. As we're going to wrap up, why does Allah not... Right, I wanted to say, as part of... and I'll also comment on the Imran Khan and the India-Pakistan thing as well, but before I come to that, I wanted to say, look, somebody had asked me that, oh, when you commented on the Imam Asim thing, I met this brother, we got chatting at the hairdressers, people. So, Omar... And he's also a student of Sheikh Sajjad, who's an amazing scholar from the Midlands, also related to me, so do reach out to Sheikh Sajjad. He spells it as SJAAD with the Sacred Texts Institute. And he's an amazing, very open-minded scholar as well. So he studies with him. So I met Omar today, this person, we just got chatting, and he said, well, you know, and he raised some concerns. He said, you know, you're speaking about the Imam Asim thing. And I thought this is definitely worth addressing. This almost sounds like, you know, when Sheikh Riyad al-Haq... Remember when Sheikh Riyad al-Haq would say, oh, I met somebody in the supermarket. I was approached. However, although... not to mock. I'm not mocking. I don't want to upset the Sheikh Riyad al-Haq following. I'm just saying, friend. So so he said that, you know, when you address the Imam Asim issue, and there was a lot of jokes, but with the Imam Asim issue, later on it emerges there were allegations of rape and all this stuff, and your commentary was very humorous and you're just being funny and banter, but this topic is so serious. Now, I just want to clarify that, look, I discussed the Imam Asim thing over 2 weeks. Yeah, so in my Mufti Masala segment. Now, the first week, if you watch it, the secret recording had not been leaked. So nobody had any knowledge of any other allegations. All they knew of was where he allegedly met some girl and he stroked her face. And then she kept meeting him allegedly in this car, and then he touched her leg, and then she was like, oh my god, and then she came again and met him at midnight, and then he allegedly kissed her or something. So I was laughing at the whole thing that was available at that time, okay? And you can watch it, and I actually make it clear in the beginning that, look, if there's been a crime, report it to the police. If there hasn't, what's all of this? And I was cracking jokes at Sheikh Asrar's remedy to the situation, that you must pray 5 times a day and it must be monitored and so on and so forth. And I was just kind of satirizing all of that. The week after, a whole week later, their private meeting recording is leaked on YouTube. So I heard that, and in that there were other allegations. Now, I don't know the reality of those allegations, but they mentioned there, and that's why my second discussion was a lot more serious. So I in no way was belittling these crimes, and if these crimes, I was actually very serious in my second thing, and I said that this is utterly unacceptable, all this nonsense that's been going on. So just to clarify, I wanted to clarify that. Okay, so somebody's constantly going on about the wheelbarrow position now. Right, people, what else is going on? What else? Right, so those of you, what's people in Pakistan recently, so first of all, those of you that don't know, there's an area in Kashmir, in Indian occupied Kashmir, called Pulwama, and over there was an attack, a suicide bombing last week, and it killed, I think, 40 military personnel. So the person, there was some kind of military bus going, and the person, I don't know, I think he drove a car into it or something, and he blew it up, and there were soldiers on board. So he killed, I think, 40 people or something. Now that, first of all, is, we all condemn any acts of atrocity. Things like that do not help the cause of the people in Kashmir. They do not help any cause. Tragedy only begets further tragedy. Okay, these kind of atrocities beget atrocities, and so that has to be very clear. Okay, now that said, India immediately just immediately blamed Pakistan, said Pakistan was behind this. Now, and Imran Khan only today, I think, or was it yesterday, but I watched it today, responded, because Imran Khan had this whole visit with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, had come to Pakistan, and they were preparing for that. So India just kind of blamed, and India said that, oh, we will retaliate with Pakistan, and Jaish-e-Mohammed has taken responsibility. Jaish-e-Mohammed is a proscribed, like a banned organization from Pakistan, as in based in Pakistan. They're a jihadi organization. And India said that we're going to isolate Pakistan economically throughout the globe, and we're going to impose sanctions and this, and we're going to stop trade, and we're going to do all these kind of things. And I think it's all, this, as far as all of this is concerned, it is ridiculous. Okay. India, I personally am not somebody that is opposed to India. I like India. I'm, phir bhi dil hai Hindustani. I think really India, Pakistan, hum sab in asal, I think ek hi hain. We're all one people in essence, right? Us people anyway, Indo-Pak people. Our asal, our roots are just one. These kind of politically drawn borders do not really differentiate us. Race is a social construct. I mean, our ethnicities and our heritage is just one. So I'm not really at all in any way, some people are anti-India and stuff like that. I'm not like that at all. I love the Indian culture and stuff like this. Bollywood, yeah. If not anything, Bollywood he say. And I condemn any of these acts of terrorism, but the truth is, Imran Khan made an epic speech today where he said, look, if there's any action, any evidence, bring it to us. We guarantee that there will be action. And he said that, look, you have to grow up, that in this day and age, you have to learn that military kind of action doesn't work. Like he gave the example of Afghanistan. He said after 17 years, America is even saying, okay, the way forward with the Taliban is going to be through dialogue. Like, in all honesty, even younger Indians today, like millennials and these people see, many of them see that, look, having a military occupation in Indian administered Kashmir, it's unacceptable, man. The amount of oppression. I'm not saying let Kashmir be part of Pakistan, but I'm saying give them their independence. Like what, like how long will you subdue a people? What is the purpose of this? Give them some kind of autonomy. Let them be. I mean, this, you know, now you have young Kashmiris who have such hatred in their heart that they're prepared to kill themselves and kill all these people. Right? So all of this, like what, it's about time people like the Indian parliamentarians think about what is actually going, how long will they, you know? Istara, you know, like the poet says, Tara saath nibhana hai dushwar sa. Tu bhi talwar sa, मैं भी talwar sa. You know, like this, it won't work like this, that you just behave like a sword and I behave like a sword. And Imran Khan actually said that, you know, if you're dreaming of any military action, there will be immediate retaliation. So I think this, but on the same, you know, whilst on that note, I do equally say that, look, these kind of things, it is unfortunate what Islam has become today. That this, you know, this jihadi thing, this whole concept of Islam being kind of usurped and hijacked by these people. Today, the cry of Allahu Akbar has become a terrifying cry. You know, Allahu Akbar. If somebody said, if we were outside somewhere, somebody said, Allahu Akbar, everybody's going to totally crap it. They think like some guy's going to blow himself up. This was actually a dhikr. This was a term which is like the glorification of God. And they've turned it into a cry of terrorism. You know, there's a famous poet of India, an amazing poet, Nida Fazli Saab. And he has a poem where he says, Koshish ke bawajood, ye ilzam reh gaya. That despite all the effort, that this allegation still remained. That har kaam mein koi kaam hamesha reh gaya. That always some action, some task, no matter how much we accomplished, was always left undone. And he says that, he says, namazi to, he says, ut ke masjidon se namazi to chale gaye. That the people who'd come to the masjids to pray, that ut ke masjidon se namazi chale gaye, that the people who'd come to the mosque to pray, they have left and long gone. Dahshat garon ke haath mein Islam reh gaya. That these terror organizations, Islam was left in their hands. That this, it is a tragedy. Wallahi, it hurts to see what Islam has become. A religion that was originally built upon compassion. That it came out of this whole thing, the verse of the Quran, that rahmatan lil alameen, a mercy for the world. Something where the Messenger of Allah, wherever he had an opportunity, stopped any kind of, even at the conquest of Mecca, his famous words, stopping, rebuking the companion that wanted to retaliate because the people had suffered with violence. And he said, Al-Yawm Yawm al-Malhama. And the Prophet said, no, it is not the day of massacre. It is the day of compassion. Al-Yawm Yawm al-Marhama. That this Prophet who came to kind of rid superstition, to rid this kind of tyranny, that this message today, the remnants of it that we have, is simply like the rubble, is nothing but bomb explosions and terrorism and violence and misogyny and brutality and control. And I'm not saying that's all it is, but this is all that is apparent to people. This is what seems to stand out. When people look at Islam, this is all they can see. It breaks, seriously, wallahi, it's heart-shattering to see this. That this message has ended up, it's like, in the words of Sagar Siddiqui Saab, where he says, "Na jaane kahan kho gayi hai murawwat," that I don't know where civility has got lost, like humanity. Where did it get lost along the way? "Na jaane kahan kho gayi hai murawwat, badi dur tak to mere saath aayi." That yet it travelled with me a long way, but then it lost its track. That I don't know where civility and humanity went along the way. And I think, so may Allah, I think, make things easy for people. I think that in many ways it's very disheartening. And I think sometimes it makes me think that, maybe we can't, the task is too much, that we won't be able to change the narrative. We won't be able to, sometimes it can leave people desponding. But I think it is important to realize that we have to, that if people are going to do these atrocities, if people are going to hijack the name, then we have to kind of double our efforts. We have to double down and make sure even harder that message, the true message of Islam being of mercy, compassion, gets out there. Okay, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy for people. Guys, it's really gone on way too long. Unlike me, I don't think you guys are vampires. So I think I'll leave it with that, inshallah. Take very good care of yourselves, people. Any issues, do reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Snapchat, I'm on Instagram. Same, it's Mufti Abu Layth. Do like my page. Like it, share it, yeah. Like it and share it, man. Spread the love. Spread the love. Oh, I forgot to mention that part of India's boycott was that, it's definitely worth mentioning, is they said we're going to stop sending ripe tomatoes to Pakistan. They actually said in several interviews, they go, "Hamare tomato khakar hame maar rahe hain." They said, these Pakistanis are eating our tomatoes and then they're killing us? Huh? Seriously, that's actually a serious interview. They said, "Hamare tomato khake hame maar rahe hain." Tomato nahi bhejenge wahan pe. We're not going to send any more tomatoes to Pakistan. So guys, Pakistan has had it. There's going to be a serious tomato drought. Oh, ye qayamat. End of times, people, end of times. The apocalyptic hour is upon us. There is a shortage of tomatoes. So guys, take very good care of yourselves. Till next week, inshallah. Much love. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.